Hello, and welcome to Marcel and. This is a great opportunity for everybody out there in Guilford and across Connecticut. I'm so pleased to have this wonderful guest author from the basic unit of trying to create your own book to actually publishing it and getting it out to people to really hear his message and understand what's going on. It's a great opportunity for everyone to really enjoy what is actually happening. And with this show and with the following shows that we hope to have with other authors and musicians and engineers and all the other different people that I love to talk to, welcome to Marcel and. Today's show, we're talking about the fight for conscious human life and a global plan for the left and the right. A journey starts within us. I'm proud to welcome the author, Carl T. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for coming to the show.
Thank you, Marcel. Boy, that sounds good to hear.
Yeah, it's good to hear you too.
This has really been a journey. I never expected to be here doing this type of thing.
Well, you know, you've got a story to tell, and can you just tell me a little bit like how you first came about wanting to write a book in the first place?
Well, in my journey. In 2009, when I got laid off, it was just a passion to understand what is going on. We all had very uneasy feelings. I had a great job. I considered it my dream job. And I don't think I've ever gone more than a day without a job since I was 10 years old, and I couldn't find a job. And it's like, something's wrong here. And so at first it was just to figure out what's going on, to understand the language that our leaders were using, things that you might have heard in the past, you know, over the past 20, 30 years, and you never really paid attention. I mean, we all get engaged around the times when we need to vote. But we rarely go much deeper than that. I mean, there are people that are attracted to that, but the majority of us are living everyday life, enjoying our freedom, trying to do better, trying to plan for the future, our retirements, things of that nature. So we're not engaged. Shortly after I started really investigating and really just looking up the definitions of words, progressivism, what's the New World Order all about, all of these different terms, trying to figure out why is government doing the exact opposite of what we really need to do, what has been proven in the past, you know, what little knowledge we managed to retain over the years, because, you know, we're not particularly engaged. I was invited into what was then a secret society. And that was quite a shock to get that letter one day. And it says, is this real or is this a scam? And because I was in the position I was in, there was really no money involved. And I said, well, let me take a look at this. And it was the Neo Think Society, which is an open society right now, and they also have a political party, TVP.com, the 12 Visions Party, and they try to promote the prime law that I talk about in the book. But anyway, the very first section of manuscripts, I read well over 4,000 pages within about 6 months. I don't think I read that much in my entire life.
Okay.
Never mind, I don't think I've ever written 25,000 words or more in my entire life up to this point. But even at that point, I had no idea that I was going to write. I remember opening up the first manuscript, and I came across the very first phrase that seemed odd. It's three words we really never see together. It's very, very different. But as soon as I saw it, it was like a light turned on in my head. I knew exactly what it was. It was something that I was trying to articulate probably for most of my life. And I instantly knew what it was.
What was it?
The phrase is wide scope accounting.
Wide scope accounting.
Yep. And, or actually, it was wide scope accountability.
Okay.
All right. So, and it actually wasn't until about 2 years later that I actually looked up each word, see what each word, how it was defined and everything else. But I basically knew what it was. And it underlies this new way of thinking. And it has a lot to do with profound honesty, objectivity, really on a very basic level, simply looking at what's there with no preconceived notions. So often as we begin to investigate or think we're going to solve a problem, we have a notion of what it might be. And that kind of plays off to what you're attracted to as you start learning, start investigating. And we see in a lot of scientific journals and research, things of that nature, and you know yourself, if you expect to find a thing, you usually do.
Right.
And it's usually not the answer.
Okay. So what happened was you were unemployed, and you end up doing some reading, finding out some information that puts you on this journey. But what really changed a situation where you were reading and thinking and talking to people about stuff, but then to put it really onto paper?
It was really my passion and the fact that I was attracted to wide scope accountability and what it really stood for. And because it had been a passion all my life, from time to time you see, well, science says this, or they do this, or they put this in your food, or this happens, and then next thing you know, it's disaster. So it was my passion to get this out, and it's like, why don't businesses, why doesn't scientists know this? So it was like, okay, there's got to be some venue in which I can get this this concept out to those people, and that was my original intent. So, all right, I'm not a writer. I haven't written very much. What do I do? I'm unemployed. I'm working 2-3 different part-time jobs. This is really driving my passion to every possible moment. I'm at the computer, I'm reading this and that, figuring out, it's really caught fire inside me. So what do? You start blogging, you start writing, you try to put your words down. It's like the only avenue you have to learn this craft is practice.
Right.
And observing other people's work. It's like, okay, how did he write this? How do people, what does it sound like? What does it look like? All of those things go through your mind. And eventually I started writing more and more. Some of the blogs, a lot of the neo-think blogs, started getting a lot of positive reaction. We're starting having really profoundly deep conversations, which is something I kind of yearned for all my life, but I had to put it aside because most people don't want to talk that way.
All right, so give me an example of wide scope accountability.
All right. perhaps we'll talk about vitamin C, which was like one of the first things I can remember way back when that really, really bothered me. They started, science looked at vitamin C and decided that arbitrarily, it seems, after all these years, we realized that it was just one particular chemical. And later, much later in life, I got involved in natural health and started to understand all of those things. I've been into natural health probably for about 20 years. But they just basically looked, okay, it's one chemical, something we can reproduce, maybe we can put it in the pill. You know, this is kind of the pharmaceutical view of vitamins and trying to cure diseases and things of that nature. How can we create this instead of use what comes from nature? So anyway, they come up with this chemical and they call it vitamin C. Well, it seems to do absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Especially if you look back in retrospect, it does absolutely nothing. But you find this substance, everything is fortified and things of that nature. And once you get into it, you realize if this was real food, something you picked from a crop or you got it from an animal or whatever, you wouldn't need to fortify it. Why would you need to fortify it? Well, it seems in the process, all of the vital nutrients and most of the vitamins, most of that's all killed off. It's gone. And they have to add it later. And through synthesizing vitamin C, you know, they can put on the package as to regulations and things of that. Oh yeah, it's improved. We've put a lot of extra vitamin C into this, but it actually does nothing. We actually find nowadays that many of our illnesses are symptoms of scurvy.
Okay.
So this is an instance. They expected to find one particular chemical to that would exemplify or be vitamin C that they could reproduce. Whereas if they really thought about it, they said, well, what's all the rest of the stuff in the orange for?
Right, okay.
You know, the nutrients, the good bacteria, and it turns out that vitamin C is a complex like vitamin B. It's not a single chemical. So in terms of the usage of from the human body, it's like it needs everything that's there in order to utilize, to process that vitamin C.
Yeah, so you're better off eating the orange.
So that demonstration tells us that that was absolutely a lack of wide-scope accountability. In other words, they had a preconceived notion. They didn't explore all possibilities or all answers. They never even considered scurvy and the symptoms and things of that nature. They never did any kind of testing. It was a total lack of accountability. And that's a demonstration of not utilizing this particular concept.
All right, so now how would you utilize it?
Well, basically, you've got to be able to profoundly look objectively. You got to put yourself in that state of mind. And in a sense, you might just ask. Just put yourself in that asking mode that you really want to find this out. You just want to look at what's there. You extract the values as you find, and you kind of put it aside, and it'll kind of put itself together. But you need a whole lot of other concepts to go along with it. Accountability, a willingness to be profoundly honest, and that really starts within yourself. If you're not profoundly with yourself, you're not going to be profoundly honest with others, and you're not going to be profoundly honest in your research. So you have to honestly want to look at just what's there to solve the problem and consider every single possibility, probability, looking at history, looking at the present, and that's how you derive the most probable future. And conscious human life has an innate ability, which we don't find in our rulers, by the way, is an innate ability, we get it from nature, of responding differently. And what that essentially means is that if something goes wrong, or if you're in danger, you're naturally going to respond differently because now you've had that experience. But what that turned in as mankind became conscious is accountability and responsibility. So you got to be willing to be responsible for whatever you create, to make sure that it follows through with your intention. And being responsible, especially when you create something for the public, is a constant awareness to make sure that everything goes right. And unfortunately, it's not within our society to do today. We have all these lawsuits, all these regulations, fear of people being demonstrative towards you and getting into trouble and being in the news for all the wrong reasons. We don't have that opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, something's happening here. Some people are getting sick, or this is happening, that's happening. That was not my intention. So if you've gone through this in a profoundly honest way to really solve a problem, and you see that something goes awry, your natural instinct, if allowed to, would be to say, well, stop, I'm going to pull back, I'm going to find out what happened. And so, and that goes for, let's say you're producing a food, a cake, a cupcake, a cookie, or whatever. You've been producing this for years, and somebody comes to you and say, hey, you know, I can perhaps give you a break on some of your resource costs, like the price of sugar, things of that nature. We can save you some money here, and maybe you can make your product more attractive on the market by lowering the price and lowering your cost and things of that nature. And let's say you did your due diligence and was able to assess, well, you know, this isn't found in nature, but it doesn't seem to do any harm as far as we can tell at this point in time. And so you put it into the food, and all of a sudden, now we've got a new disease, or, you know, some people are having reactions and things of that nature. And especially with food and medicine, we find that people are very, very, very different. We all don't react the same. You might say that one man's food is another man's poison, so nobody seems to take accountability for that fact or even look at that. But in the perfect world, the guy who decided said, all right, this looks like it'll be okay. He's an honest guy, small businessman, doesn't want to do any, he's not going to make his customers sick, because then he loses customers, he loses business, people lose their jobs. So that embraces all wide scope accountability.
Okay. So what, with your book, The Fight for Conscious Human Life, and the global plan for the left and the right, what is really going on?
Well, as I began to really realize that our leaders, and our leaders throughout time, were extraordinarily different than you and I. And I had I'm in this digging mode, trying to find out what's going on, trying to really, really understand. And I noticed that, you know, our rulers are very different than us. They think very different than us. Many times, as you know, we see that government makes up certain rules. We're going to solve the problem this way and this way. Whereas if they ask the average value creating or producing man on the street, we can often come up with a solution right away. So nobody asks us. They just come up with these solutions seemingly arbitrarily, and of course they don't work. And we find ourselves in what we're going through right now. But
has a lot to do with the media and all this is in your book. Dealing with even healthcare, and you have this idea of a universal question. What is all that about?
Well, basically, like I said, as I began to investigate these people, and I noticed that they were very different from us, and I went back and further in time, and you can see leaders in the past, the majority of leaders. I mean, there were some exceptions, obviously. But I ended up going all the way back, and in the Neothink manuscripts, I began to understand and read Julie and Jane's work that mankind was not always fully conscious. And in the book, I talk about the bicameral mind, and what that really means is that we have a split brain, and at one point in time in our development, one side was not aware of the other. All right, we have an instinctive side, and we have an action side. Naturally, we're aware, we're walking, we're hungry, we're going to do this, do that, but our instinctual needs for survival were coming from another part of the brain that we simply weren't aware of. And I noticed that you can deduce what conscious life, once you begin to be aware of your own actions, how that affects everything else. But I also noticed that the leaders, all the way back to the days of Babylon, didn't have that retrospect look at things. They seemed to utilize different emotions than we do every day. They didn't seem to have any particular reverence for mankind. In fact, we were slaves back in Babylon. I don't know if you knew that. And we weren't fully consciously aware. So you look at all this, and it says, and all of the disempowerments that have kind of created an upside down paradigm that seems to favor the very, very few at the expense of the many, the majority of us. And it's been my observation that the majority of us are conscious, value-creating, value-producing individuals, and the leaders have never created any value in their life, never really held much of a job, don't really create any values. They propose to. They put on a good game, but what many of us don't do is we listen to them and we form our opinions, but we don't really reference that to what they do. Okay. So it comes down to the only way you can really tell the difference is through an observation of actions and content of character. That's what really tells it, not what a person says. What does he do? And you can often find that leaders throughout time, right up to the present, they say one thing and they're doing another.
Well, it sounds like the book itself is a search for truth,
yeah,
and honesty and accountability to the whole human life cycle.
Exactly.
And dealing with everything that has to do with from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to sleep, and what's happening in those 8 hours or more or less that you're sleeping throughout the whole world. It's a fascinating read and great deductions from your research, and I think that everybody should read this and really look at what you have to say about the fight for conscious human life, a global plan for the left and the right, answering the whole universal question, looking at the health care of the United States. Looking at, you even have a section in there with Occupy Wall Street. What do you really want people to walk away with after reading your book?
I really would like people to really get engaged. This is a particularly troubling time, but it's an exciting time too. This could define the rest of human life. It would seem that those that we've put in power, particularly in America, we were supposed to be in charge, and we kind of went to sleep.
Okay.
So this is really our fault, and why the journey has to start within us. So we have to begin to look and think in a different way, get back to our founding principles, particularly here in America, but the rest of the world kind of, we're told differently, but the rest of the world kind of looks to us because we were the only ones that were guaranteed rights as recognized through nature, through the fact that we became conscious beings, through the Creator. We have natural rights and we have the ability to self-rule. But in fact, the upside-down paradigm tells us just the opposite. We're bad. We know better. All these man-made rules really prevent us from being the best that we could possibly be. And that was, the Creator certainly wanted you to be the best you could be. And our forefathers designed our Constitution and our way of government and America to simply allow people to be the best that they could be. And with all these subversive man-made rules, assuming that you will do a bad thing as soon as they turn their back, you're not allowed to be good. In fact, you're assumed to be bad whether you do anything or not. This is what we have to wake up to and understand, and especially with the attack on our moral values, which our forefathers instinctively understood that the only way we can self-rule is to have a moral base. And that moral base has been chipped away through the progressive view over the past 100 years since Woodrow Wilson in the early 1900s. And that was done purposely because this group, the progressive way of thinking, is that government, small groups of people since the days of Babylon, should rule the world and rule over us and give us our rights, instead of recognizing that we have innate rights as a result of being human and achieving consciousness, and rights given to us by our Creator, nature's Creator.
Well, fascinating. So, thank you so much, Carl T. Johnson. If anybody wants to ask the author any questions, can I have your email address?
Yeah, it's Johnson dash, like a minus sign, Carl, C-A-R-L, at Comcast.net.
Okay, so Carl dash Johnson at Comcast.net.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, it's Johnson dash Carl.
Oh.
It's just backwards.
Okay, Johnson dash Carl at Comcast.net.
Yep.
Johnson dash Carl at Comcast.net. The Fight for Conscious Human Life, a global plan for the left and the right. The journey starts within us. Carl, thank you so much. It's so nice to have you at the show. Good luck to you, and I can't wait to hear more about all your endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcel, for this opportunity.
Great.